Hey everyone, this is Randall, and welcome back to the Imperial Minis channel. In this video, we're continuing our coverage of the fantasy skirmish game Moonstone, with the first in what may be an ongoing series of quick videos focused on reviewing troop and unit boxes, and providing tips on how to use the units in those boxes. For the first video in the series, we'll be taking a look at the Masquerade troop box for the Dominion faction. This box features some of the few humans to join the Dominion faction. The background and lore surrounding these characters is quite interesting and overlaps with the lore of the upcoming Shades of Moonreach faction in some fascinating ways. Perhaps we'll dive into lore a bit more in future videos, but for now let's just focus on the units themselves. This box comes with 3 characters: the Duchess, Creep, and Claudia Duvel. Aesthetics-wise, these characters all have a 18th century French vibe, and they're all wearing some sort of Venetian-inspired mask. These masks might actually be hiding something terrible about these characters, but again, that discussion is for another time. The Duchess looks like an aristocrat, and Creep like a servant of her household. Claudia looks like a bandit or highwayman of the age, albeit in high-heeled boots. I really enjoy this troop box for the utility it provides across many different troop types. The abilities these characters possess, especially the Duchess and Creep, are useful almost anywhere. Let's start off first with the Duchess herself, and then explain what makes her so special. For being a classy-looking lady in a big poofy dress, she actually has a respectable melee stat of 3, and can get a nice +2 to melee damage if she uses a piercing rising attack. Her Network of Spies passive ability can really come in handy as an ability that can affect the outcome of the entire game. It gives you +1 to your initiative roll each turn. This means that if you started the game with the initiative, Duchess gives you kind of a super initiative all game, giving you +3 to your roll in round 2, +2 in round 3, and +1 in round 4. Alternatively, if you were the early bird, this ability wears down some of the usefulness of your opponent's initiative, bringing you to par with them in round 3 and giving you an advantage in round 4. This ability costs you nothing and just happens every round as long as Duchess is in play. I can't undersell how useful this ability can be, but since dice are involved, this one can be swinging and either be clutch or completely useless, depending on your luck. Duchess's Strength from Suffering ability is a nice-to-have ability, but it's one of those abilities that's not something you can really rely on or really plan for, since it's dependent upon characters suffering catastrophes to provide benefit. If you wanted to, you could forcibly heal yourself through this ability if you bring along the Revenant in your troop, and he triggers his Visions of the Future ability on a friendly character to have them essentially transfer wounds from themselves to the Duchess by way of catastrophe wounds. Foreboding is an ability that requires enemies to suffer a wound before taking any action against the Duchess. This kind of chip damage is nice, but it's not often going to prevent someone from attempting to use an ability or attack against the Duchess. This is kind of a different version of the Look of Innocence ability that characters like Anya Bartol and Natty have, but I find Look of Innocence to be far more useful since energy is a more precious resource in this game than health. Among her passive abilities, Network of Spies is far and away the best and potentially most game-changing, in my opinion. The Duchess has one arcane ability, and it's the main reason that people include her in their troop. Succubus is a direct damage ability that, depending on how successful it is, could allow you to throw a confetti of wound and energy restoration on your troop, or focus on one character and supercharge them. Abilities that generate extra energy for your troop are extremely powerful, and this one, while expensive at 3 energy, grants the trifecta of damage to an enemy, healing to a friendly unit, and extra energy to friendly units. Even if you only pull off a 1 from this ability, doing 1 damage, healing 1, and restoring 1 energy, that could swing a game. Think about a situation where a big bruiser like Gotchgut gets an additional attack off because of the Succubus ability. I usually try to activate Duchess early in a turn to get that extra energy out there quickly. To finish up with the Duchess, let's take a look at her signature move, Threats and Promises. This is a survival signature, allowing Duchess to forego doing damage from with a rising attack, which is usually her highest damage potential melee card, to suffer 3 fewer damage from the attack. There is a downside to this damage mitigation, however, because in exchange, Duchess gives 3 energy to the enemy character, but that character may not target her for the rest of the turn. In certain situations, this could be terrible. If the Duchess is in the midst of the rest of her troop, this signature move might just allow that enemy character to move to another friendly unit and attack them for free. Where I see this being the most useful is to protect Duchess in your backline against a flanker, or in a desperate life-threatening situation, to keep Duchess alive at the expense of one of your other characters. You could imagine an extreme situation where Baron von Fancy Hat sidles up to the Duchess to hit her with one of his powerful melee attacks, and the Duchess uses this ability to prevent some of that incoming damage, keeping her alive, but giving the Baron enough energy in return to move over to and attack one of your other characters. It is a risky trade-off. Moving on to our next character, the aptly named Creep. Creep's stats are worse than Duchess's, with a lower melee and lower arcane skill, but his abilities are more numerous and specialized. Creep has the same concealed dagger ability as the Duchess, so we won't go into that again. Creep has an active ability called Victimize that costs 2 energy. Victimize increases a model's evade stat by a +2, which is to say it makes their evade stat worse. Victimize can be an amazing ability against certain troops with low evade stats, like fairies and some of the more diminutive goblins. Low evade stat or not, it's always beneficial to make enemies easier to hit. Unlike some other abilities that might just increase the arcane stat of an individual character, Victimize essentially increases the arcane stat of all of your characters against a certain enemy character by increasing that character's evade stat. Let's consider the following situation. Creep victimizes Chubbs the Fawn, bringing Chubbs from a -1 evade to a +1 evade. If Duchess were to previously attempt to use Succubus on Chubbs, she would have only drawn 3 arcane cards instead of her standard 4 because of Chubbs' -1 evade. If Chubbs had cover, she would draw even fewer cards, potentially only drawing 1 card if Chubbs was in heavy cover. Now, a victimized Chubbs will actually allow Duchess to draw 5 cards, and even if Chubbs was in heavy cover, she would still draw 3 cards and have a good shot at getting a useful card. I've used Victimize to great effect when paired with Ribald the Troll from Dominion. He typically only draws 3 arcane cards, but often draws fewer cards due to evade stats and cover. With Creep, Ribald's target is standing tall and exposed, making it much easier for him to draw the cards he needs to send a big, fat cannonball into the face of his target. Creep's 2 arcane abilities, Vitality Draw and Incubus, are essentially the same ability, but one focuses on energy and the other on health. Vitality Draw can drain your opponent's energy and give it to a friendly unit, while Incubus does the same thing for health. Vitality Draw in particular can be devastating against your enemy and be a great enabler for yourself. I love using Vitality Draw against big meaty giants and trolls who charge up the field to attack my units only to be left with no energy and nothing to do. Incubus is less useful in my experience, but does give another heal and direct damage ability to your troop. You can combine Creep with Duchess and have Duchess pass Creep an extra energy from Succubus early in the turn, and then have Creep use his Vitality Draw twice during his activation, or alternatively victimize an enemy, and then combine that with Vitality Draw to have a chance to sap even more energy from them, and enable the rest of your troop to give that character a beatdown. Creep's signature move, Slip into Shadows, is a pretty straightforward survival skill that allows him to essentially throw down a Batman smoke bomb and disappear. If Creep happens to be in possession of a Moonstone or be in a really hot area of the map, that 4-inch teleport can be a lifesaver. I say teleport instead of move because the wording on the card says to place this model within 4 inches. So within 4 inches could technically be on the other side of some piece of terrain, or on the other side of a wooded patch, or within a wooded patch, or a water feature. You get the idea. So this 4-inch placement is actually much better than a 4-inch move. We'll wrap up our review by looking at Claudia Duvel, who is kind of the black sheep of the box in that she's not a tricky support character, but instead an agile fighter and Moonstone stealer. Claudia has a very respectable melee stat of 4, so she's no slouch in melee. Her sure-footed passive allows her to freely move across the battlefield without caring much for the terrain she's moving through. Since water features and wooded patches don't affect her, she can also use these to her advantage, evading enemy pursuers by taking refuge in these terrain features. This ability makes her a natural pursuer of Moonstones and Moonstone carriers. With Brace of Pistols, Claudia can, once per game, fire her pistol twice without reloading. This can really come in handy if she's chasing after a Moonstone carrier and needs to gun them down, or if she just wants to push through a little bit of extra damage on a critical activation. Her other defining ability, the active ability Robbery, further cements her role as a Moonstone thief, allowing her to snatch away Moonstones from similarly sized or wounded opponents. She won't be able to rob healthy giants or trolls, so she'd need to soften them up with some pistol shots before attempting to snatch their Moonstones. Claudia's signature move, Stand and Deliver, always makes me think of the 1980s Edward James Olmos movie, but I'm fairly certain that there were no Moonstones in that film or no real connection to Claudia Deville. If anyone knows anything better, please feel free to correct me in the comment section. But in any case, Stand and Deliver is another Moonstone snatching ability that forces the opponent to either hand over their Moonstones or suffer 3 wounds. In most situations, I would expect the opponent to just suffer the wounds, even if those wounds would kill them and force them to drop the Moonstone. Dropping the Moonstone is generally preferable to handing the Moonstone over to Claudia, since she would then have to still spend 1 energy to pick up the Moonstone. The package of abilities that Claudia brings cements her role as a great Moonstone thief. This Troupe box is a fantastic addition to any Dominion player's collection. These characters all have a place in the faction, and like any good Troupe box, they work very well together. For me, the Duchess is the best unit in the box, followed closely by Creep, with Claudia as the least uniquely useful. The Duchess and Creep are great support characters. They each have survival signature moves, but you probably won't want either of them to get locked into a melee. They can push some damage in melee when they need to, and the Duchess punishes opponents in melee with her Foreboding ability. But you really don't want to risk losing the Duchess's Network of Spies passive or her Succubus Arcane ability. These both provide a lot of value. I play a lot of Goblin-focused lists, and these characters, despite not being Goblins, fit in very well with those lists. If you want to try something a little different, I'd suggest leaning into the Rogue keyword that Creep and Claudia share. Moradai, the Gnome Rogue, is a dual-faction Commonwealth Dominion unit that provides a passive bonus to nearby rogues, giving them +1 arcane stat. This would greatly aid Creep in his various depraved actions and, by extension, benefit the rest of his troop. This Moradai rogue synergy would also benefit some of the fairies, like Belladonna, Silvertongue, Butterfingers, and others. Looking at these options, you could add Moradai to the troupe of Masquerade characters and then round out the list with 1 or 2 fairies for a really devious, underhanded list of super shady characters. Alright, now let's look at the verdict on this box and kind of rate it on a number of different categories here. So damage dealing, they're going to be a 3 out of 5. None of the characters in this box are specifically designed to be damage dealers. There are, however, some damaging abilities here. So Duchess with Succubus, Creep with his, Incubus ability, and Claudia Deville with her Brace of Pistols. So there is some damage potential here, but none of these units is designed to really be a damage dealer. So this is going to be a 3 out of 5. Healing also is going to be a 3 out of 5 for much the same reason. There are healing abilities in this box, but nobody here is a designated healer. They can kind of be like a bit of an off healer if needed. So Duchess with Succubus can do a little bit of healing. Creep with Vitality Draw, with Incubus can do some healing. And energy manipulation, they're definitely going to be a 5 out of 5 here. This is one of the main reasons you want to bring this box. So the Duchess's Succubus ability is going to generate energy, and Creep's Vitality Draw is not only going to generate energy for your units, it's going to take away energy from opponent's units. So that's why it's going to get a 5 out of 5 here. The ability to steal away energy from an opponent and give it to your own troop is extremely powerful. Out of activation movement, this is going to be a 1 out of 5. There's really no movement shenanigans to speak of in this box aside from Creep's signature ability to kind of teleport 4 inches. So that's going to be a 1 out of 5. There's not really much in the way of movement shenanigans in this box. Utility abilities. This is kind of a roll-up of any abilities that didn't really fall into the aforementioned 4 categories. So this is going to be a 4 out of 5, due in large part to Duchess's Network of Spies, Creep's Victimize. So those 2 are the main abilities I'm thinking of here. But Claudia Deville, also her Robbery ability comes in here for utility abilities. And then some of the passives, to the Duchess's passives, I mentioned previously, I didn't think too much of them. They're kind of nice to have. Claudia Deville with Sure-Footed is pretty nice for being able to move across the map. So those all kind of get rolled up here into utility abilities, and I think that deserves a 4 out of 5. For keyword synergy, there's not a whole lot in the way of synergy for their keywords. We discussed the rogue synergy just a few minutes ago, and other than that, these guys are humans, and Dominion doesn't care too much about humans. and then they are there's a noble. So the Duchess is a noble. Right now, that really only synergizes with Gotchgut's bodyguard ability. So Gotchgut can kind of body block for her, take some hits for her if he's nearby. But I think in the future, in the near future, when the shades come out, these keywords will this troop box's keywords will be a little bit more significant. So when the shades come out, one of the shade characters, Igor the Servant, does have some interactions with the human keywords and the noble keyword. So I think maybe keyword synergy will possibly go up maybe to a 3 out of 5 if that's really enough of a really enough of a benefit when the shades come out. We'll see though. But for right now, it's a 2 out of 5. And value, this is a little bit of a subjective category. Value for me, it's a 4 out of 5 because it's kind of a measure of how useful overall is this unit in other boxes. You know, is this troop box shoehorned into one particular type of list, or is this troop box really useful across many different lists? You know, so that's, to me, is kind of speaks to the value of this troop box. And for me, it's a 4 out of 5 because I routinely use at least 2 of these characters, Duchess and Creep, in multiple other lists, and just kind of plop them in, and they provide lots of value. So for me, it's going to be a 4 out of 5. And then the overall rating, I'm also giving this whole box a 4 out of 5. That 4 out of 5 is not an average of all these ratings. If it was an average, I think it would come out to maybe like a 3.2 or 3.5 or somewhere in there. But for me, I'm making it a 4 out of 5 just for my own internal mental weighting of weighing of these, different categories. So I really think the energy manipulation abilities and the utility and value that this box provides really make up for the shortcomings that it has in other areas. So for me, overall, 4 out of 5, fantastic box. I use these characters all the time and highly recommend people that play Dominion make sure that they own a box of these characters. Alright, this video ran a little bit longer than I expected it to, but that just goes to show A, how much there is to talk about each of these units' abilities, and B, just how great this troop box is. I really only scratched the surface on what there is to discuss in terms of strategy and tactics with these units. There are certainly many more synergies and uses for them that I either missed or decided to exclude for runtime purposes. I'd like to do more videos like this in the future for other troop boxes and single unit boxes. When I was first getting started in this game, I found videos discussing tactics and strategy to be extremely helpful, so hopefully I can pay it forward in some small measure to my fellow players. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And if you can think of any other synergies that I didn't mention here, please feel free to drop those down in the comments. If you'd like to see more content like this from the channel, please do consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Until next time, this is Randall, signing off.